Okay, everybody, I should be live. I'm going to take a few seconds just to verify that over at YouTube before I start. And I might wait for some people to join. It was funny. I was watching a little stream from Dave Rubin yesterday, and he had this thing where he was waiting for 100 people to be live before he would start talking. And there were 100 right away. And so then he said, oh, I'll wait for 200. So we got 200 people. Boom. Let me see what I've got over at YouTube. I got a few people watching. So, yeah, and I just turned off my, the feedback that I get. Okay. So I am live. Hello, everybody. I'm back from my vacation. And you see, I'm not wearing my headphones. If I'm not on with your own, or if I'm not on with some of you guys, if I don't have some of you guys in the Zoom where I am listening to something, there's no purpose for me to wear my headphones. Usually my headphones tame my hair in some sort of shape. And so my hair's wild, but whatever. It's kind of phony to wear the headphones if I don't need them, right? So I'll be back on Saturday with Yaron. And yeah, I'll have to wear the headphones because I need to hear him and have a discussion with him. But when I have chats with just you guys, if I'm not actually hearing anything, yeah, you'll see me with my wild, crazy hair. So I just have a few things today. I'm just back from my vacation, and I wanted to give you guys an idea of what I see myself doing going forward. This may end up being my Patreon intro video. It's kind of the conception to let you know what I'm up to. When you go on a vacation, I think any good vacation will give you a sense of the total of your life, the forest versus the trees, and help you just kind of within your own life decide what things are more important to you, what things are less important to you. You just let you step back for a bit and get a sense of it. And for me, the vacation that I went on, which was in Amsterdam, where I saw a lot of art, had sort of a second layer of this, because what I've been telling you guys is that I've been thinking about stepping back from doing a lot of day-to-day news commentary and focusing on this book that I really need to finish. The book is called Legalizing Privacy, Why and How, and I'll talk a little bit more about it in a minute. So, I had expected to go to the vacation and just get a sense of what things are important and, come back with a renewed determination to focus on this book. And then as I was going through some of the museums, I went to actually 3 museums, which is pretty good for, 6 days where it wasn't really planned to go see a lot of art, unlike my last trip. But, went to 3 museums, one of them twice, got to see the Rijksmuseum twice. And I was looking at a lot of paintings from a wide variety of artists, some sculpture too, but mostly paintings. And with the paintings, most of the museums, there's 3 of them I went to, but they had a lot of descriptions. So I was reading a lot of these descriptions, and at the Rijksmuseum, they had a special exhibit of portraiture. So there were a whole lot of figures from history, and then you'd read the descriptions and you get a sense of who they were and what roles they played in history. And I was a math major, and my history education has always been kind of deficient. So I was telling some people on Facebook the other day that this, immersion in art gave me a sense of the scope of history that I don't normally immerse myself in. Normally, I'm reading the New York Times every day, and it's the latest nothing burger on Trump or the latest policy gaffe that Trump made. Or as today, we're trying to make sense of, do we think that I'm sorry, I'm still tired, guys. Trump's canceling of the Iran deal, is that a good thing or not? We're trying to make sense of that. And I don't have this sense of hundreds of years, at least, of relevant Western history that we should be looking back on in thinking about things. And I got more of a sense of that from the art. I also got a sense of that through walking through Amsterdam. I only got a taste of this, but there's a real, kind of history of liberty in Amsterdam. And just to give you one snippet, they have a statue of Spinoza, and the engraving on the bottom says the end or the purpose of the state is liberty or freedom. That's how you would translate it. Right in the middle of the city. And I think that's excellent. Where do end of the state is freedom over there in Amsterdam. They also have a John Adams Institute, which is kind of a really cool thing right there in the city. So you get the sense of the importance of, working to further ideas for the long term, freedom for the long term, liberty for the long term. And for me, it was, that reminder of the scope of history over hundreds of years was a, reminder to not emphasize so much for myself the day-to-day developments of, whatever you see on the New York Times from the latest from Trump, or, this primary election over here, and what does it mean? That it wasn't the worst case scenario for the Republicans, but there's some signs of caution, says the New York Times, and we should all get worried about it. It definitely gave me a sense of, just kind of step back and focus on what's important. And what do I have to offer potentially that could contribute, to the whole progression? I don't know, again, whether this theory of privacy that I have is going to end up being influential or important. From everything that I know and my thinking about it, I think it's right. And so I think it's good for me to kind of turn my focus a lot more to that and less on the day-to-day stuff. So that's what, a bit of what I got from my trip from Amsterdam. If you want to see, I took a lot of photos of the art that I saw. I also ended up going out and doing the touristy thing at the Tulip Garden, which is about 45 minutes outside of the city. I've only posted a few pictures from that. I've still got so many flower pictures to sort through. You know me, I take a lot of flower pictures. So when I was there, I just went crazy, and I don't want to bombard you guys. So maybe I'll do a couple Instagram posts that each have the maximum of 10 photos or something like that. So it won't be too bad. But I've posted a few of those. I've got some art up. I'm going to get some more pictures up. So follow me on Instagram if you want to see all of that. As I said, I'm going to keep doing my show with Yaron once a week. That's my plan. Otherwise, what I want to do is turn my focus more to my book. And what I'm thinking is I could do a show like this once a week where I'm just talking informally to you guys, and I can give you sort of an update on how things are going with the book and talk about anything that's coming up in the news that's relevant, because as I'm looking at the news, I'm going to try to turn my focus more towards privacy issues. And even I think the only news story that I posted while I was on my vacation was a privacy related story. Somebody whom I follow on Twitter and who sometimes sends me some good stories, he had tagged me in a story about a number of the tech giants getting together to fight the government on the issue of encryption. Some of even our better politicians, Ted Cruz is extremely disappointing on this, have been arguing for a backdoor, a mandated backdoor into any technology like our iPhone and stuff. And the better tech companies, Apple, Google, also Facebook, okay, all the people who think that Zuckerberg is some totalitarian, they have all been fighting on behalf of keeping encryption legal. So I thought that was great. So, I was on my vacation. It's related to this more privacy focus. And at the same time, it was good news. So I didn't feel so bad posting that during the vacation. One other thought, by the way, the thought that I had again, it was this idea of not being so provincial in the scale of time or the dimension of time, that all the media that's out there that we're bombarded with every day, everything that's in our news feeds on the social media, everything that's on the front page of the newspapers, they're trying to encourage you to get all worked up about the slightest little development in the day-to-day politics and everything else. And that was what I came away with from my trip, was just not to be so provincial in this dimension of time, to think more on the scale of what's important in history and do the things that are important for your own life, accomplishing the goals that you want to during this very limited time that we have here. I was reinforced in that a little bit because I was watching Jordan Peterson. He had his April Q&A up, and it was interesting. He was talking about something that I disagree with him on, but he was talking about women who take advantage of the fact that in today's era we have reliable birth control, right? So women can take reliable birth control and they can decide whether or not they want to have children. And someone had written to him and said, do you have any advice for women who waited too long and that they, couldn't have children and they regret it? And he had helpful advice. I mean, he's always got some nice, helpful advice for people at whatever juncture in their life they are. But one of the comments that he made was that these women who have used birth control and use that to decide not to have children, that they are, how did he put it? I was going to say like a product of their time. Let me go back and, sorry, you guys, I'm still a little tired from my jet lag. And I'll tell you one other thing I learned on my trip that's relevant to that. It's not so much jet lag. It's that I wasn't as careful with my diet. Yeah, a product of your time. So this is the quotation from him. To be a product of your time is in some ways a catastrophe. That's what he said. To be a product of your time is in some ways a catastrophe. And he was saying about these women who've done this, it says that they make the wrong decision about whether to have children because of the availability of birth control. And so obviously he has in his mind this conception of the women not having a choice in the matter, like suppose the birth control wasn't available to them and they would have an unintended pregnancy, but that somehow that would still be the right decision for them. So, I had somebody who was arguing on my thread the other day about he's exactly the same as Ayn Rand, and he's a pragmatist and he's into, the evolutionary idea of truth, and which I think Sam Harris also has an element of. Wait, no, that came out in the discussion. Yeah, that's his idea, right? That what ends up playing out to have been the right thing for something eventually is the true thing or the good thing. And, obviously for us as objectivists, we have a very different conception of what is right or wrong. So for me, the right decision for the woman at the time is if she was careful, taking into account her whole hierarchy of values, even if she makes a mistake because she has incomplete knowledge, or for some reason that isn't in her control, she weighs some factor more heavily than something else or whatever. Maybe later she regrets her decision, but that doesn't mean that at the time that she made the decision, it was wrong, right? So obviously I disagree with him there. But then he said, to be a product of your time is in some ways a catastrophe. And that resonated with me in relation to, again, that point about not being too provincial in the dimension of time, and keeping in mind the relative importance of things in the scale of history. So for example, when I come back from a vacation like that, and again, I'm thinking that I'm not going to be as concerned with the day-to-day news, I look at a development like Trump, canceling the Iran deal. And I would say probably it's a good thing that he does this, we think, but it's hard to know with Trump because you don't know what's coming next and how he's going to handle whatever comes next from it. I don't buy all the stuff that the New York Times is trying to push, that this is necessarily a bad thing, and that Trump should have a good with to put in place with it, because obviously they're on the premise that it's a good thing to deal with, with totalitarian theocrats who want to destroy you and want to destroy Israel and stuff. These are not people that you want to make a deal with. So what do you make of this, right? What do you make of this? You say, well, we should never have made that deal in the first place. But what is Trump going to put in its place? I don't know. I can't get so excited about it because it's hard to know whether it's going to be a good thing overall. We should not have made a deal with Iran. But what's, as I said, what's coming next? If you look at the latest Nothing Burger about Michael Cohen, and he was connected to some of these oligarch people in Russia. Is there anything there to it? The New York Times has this big headline, and then when you read the whole thing, it's this whole complicated mess of this one's connected to that one, connected to the other one, and the hand, what is it? The leg bone connected to the knee bone to the right, and you get so confused by the time you're at the bottom, you can't keep track of it. It's ridiculous. So can I make very much of that? Do I think that for sure that means there was some collusion? Everybody is hiring these consulting firms to figure out how to lobby these days. AT&T was one of the people, or one of the companies, that hired this firm to try to get some sense of what they could expect under the Trump administration. So you just can't get overly excited about these things. And right now, in terms of politicians, we've got usually two lousy choices, neither of which seems it's going to make like a huge bit of difference. When you have a real choice and you can see some sort of, substantial difference between either voting for a certain piece, like an initiative, a ballot initiative, or voting for or against certain candidate or whatever, if you think there's actually a substantive difference, okay, get excited about it, but otherwise I can't see doing it. So what am I going to do, right? What am I focusing on? The book. I went back yesterday and I dug in, and I've got my old outline from the book. It was, kind of a descriptive outline that gave a brief description of each of the chapters. And at the time I had 9 different chapters. Should I tell you, I'm embarrassed to say that this outline was from 4 years ago. Yes, 4 years ago. A lot has happened between then and now. I had the kidney surgery, I had a whole bunch of personal stuff, and then I got a bit distracted and thought I was going to leave intellectual work entirely and do something different. And then I got called back to Tucker, and I thought, oh, maybe I'll just do talk show host all the time. And now I'm thinking, no, the important thing is to get back to this book. By the way, I think if I write this book and it makes some sort of a stir out there, that it could help me come back and do commentary on a bigger scale. And that would be great if so. But, being a professional political commentator, either here on YouTube, how Dave Rubin has been able to carve out a niche for himself, and, Joe Rogan, he's got a very important podcast and everything else that's done really well. It's like trying to be a rock star. It's a huge thing, and who knows if anybody's going to make it. But what I do think is, if I have a chance of coming out there and contributing to the conversations that are out there, and I think I have something to contribute. I think I do, and I'll continue to demonstrate that in my conversations with your own. But I think the best chance is some kind of a book that it, basically gives an example of more extended and thorough thinking about an important subject, something that I hope people will care about. And, maybe Tucker will let me be on his show again, actually talking about a book. Maybe Ben Shapiro. It'd be nice if Dave Rubin would have me on, and these kind of things could help. So I think this is the best place for me to put my focus. What I've done so far is I went through this outline. I went through some feedback that I had gotten from Steve Simpson a while ago. I still have my notes from that. And I ended up making the decision, which I was ambivalent about back then, to take out one of the chapters that I had planned in here and to sort of reconfigure the other chapters. So now I've got a very typical kind of 10 chapter plan, where the typical nonfiction book, 50,000 words, 10 chapters, 5,000 words a chapter. And I've got a plan that I think will work for that. The book is called Legalizing Privacy, Why and How. That's still the title. And a lot of it's written. A lot of it is based on law review articles that I've done, lectures that I've done. But as Leonard Peikoff taught me, even though you think you've got, a draft of lectures or something, it's going to make it easy to write a book, there's still going to be a lot of rewriting, revising. There's also some actual subject matter of this book that's yet to exist. And that is because the Supreme Court has not yet decided or announced its decision in the Carpenter case, at least as far as I know. I haven't checked the news in the last couple hours or so, but the Carpenter decision is due within about a month. And that decision is something that I'm going to be measuring against my solution to the problem. The problem presented in my book again is, and the only reason I'm able to formulate my, the problem that I'm solving in my book in these terms is because of the Snowden revelations, by the way. Snowden, as I said, not only contributed to the ability to bring a case like Carpenter to court, but for me personally, he helped me to think about this issue of privacy and solidify my statement of the problem. And my statement of the problem, those of you who have been following me for a long time, it's this, is that as we go through our daily life, as you are right now watching me on YouTube, you are sharing information with a third party. Right now, you're sharing information with YouTube. YouTube has some idea. Maybe you have an account with YouTube. They have your IP address probably or something. I don't know. You could be using, I guess, an anonymizer. But, there's only so many things you can do as you go about your day and not end up giving information to YouTube or a third party, right? So what do you do when you go around? If you're going around, for instance, on the subway in a city, you've got a card that you're scanning, trains, subway, buses, whatever. If that links you to your identity, then you're giving information. When you come back into the United States, right, you're getting your passport scanned. They know where you've been and everything. They track you through that. Of course, that they're the government, so that's not going to count as third party. Sorry, tired here. Other third parties you're sharing with, when you go to a supermarket and you check out and you give them your credit card is now conveying information, or they're retaining information about your purchases. When you go to a doctor, of course, you're giving information to them. Every banking transaction that you do, whether in person or online, you're sharing some information with the bank, which is the third party. Cell phone. When I went to Amsterdam, I had forgotten to tell AT&T and to have them set me up on whatever international roaming or anything like that. And I found out when I arrived, and I only remembered it when I arrived, and I go to turn the phone on. I said, oh God, I didn't do that. And sure enough, they automatically knew where I was. And they, gave me a little text message, and they said, you now have international roaming, and it's, you're carrying your same plan over to this foreign country, and it's $10 a day. That's great. They did it automatically. They converted it over. Funny thing is, though, I didn't get data until the last second of the last day, which was really weird. I didn't have the use of data. Maybe I need to turn it off and turn it back on again to get that to work. But it wasn't so bad that I was, didn't have data access when I was there. A lot of the time I was trying to take a break. Someone over here in the YouTube questions is asking me, where can we pre-order the book? I am not going to give you an option of pre-ordering unless I'm sure of when it's going to be available. And so right now what I'm doing is I'm trying to come up with a doable plan for finishing this book, how many chapters and how long a time and everything else. And of course the editing. And I'm probably just going to publish it through Amazon. I'm thinking of doing that. I've read a number of, good reviews about publishing on Amazon and the fact that books can really take off in that format. But of course, I'd like to offer a print option as well. I think Amazon offers the ability to do that, but I need to look more into that. So I will let you know as soon as I have a commitment that I can make as I dig into this and write some more. I'll give you experience that I've had with just sitting down and focusing on a writing project. In my final year of graduate school, I was given a dissertation fellowship, a final year dissertation fellowship, which meant I didn't have to teach at all. And it was really nice because I could just focus on the book. And the other thing, Yaron did this for me back then, is he let me use some office space at the Ayn Rand Institute. So I would go in there regularly and just use this little open office and sit and write. And I finished my dissertation in a really reasonable time. You know, the standard length of time to do a PhD is about 5 years. And I mean, that, you know, that's like just kind of the normal planned time. Many people extend their PhDs much longer than that. I knew a guy when I was at USC who was there for about 10 years before he finished. Mine ended up being about 5 years and a few months because of the time just to get everything processed and do my actual final exam and everything. But I wrote that, you know, dissertation steadily. And why? It's because I knew what I was going to write. And you know, I had the whole plan and outline almost in my head. It just kind of write itself. Sorry, I can't hear what I'm doing here. And I don't know if you guys can hear me well with the mic. Now I don't have the headphones on, so I don't have a sense of this microphone either. Yeah, so I'll give you an idea when I know what kind of pace I can keep up, and then I'll probably make a pre-order available on Amazon. And like I said, I'll try to offer a print option as well. Stuart over here at the chat in YouTube is saying that Ben Wisner, he's the ACLU attorney for Snowden. He said the third-party doctrine is on its last leg. I wonder how that's going. Yeah, see, we are all waiting to see what happens in Carpenter, right? The Carpenter case is exactly on point because what it's about is it's about the information that we share with our cell phone service providers about our location, cell phone location data, and whether or not the government needs to obtain a warrant in order to get that data. So, you know, this is right within the third party doctrine, because again, we share this information with the third party, and supposedly, according to that doctrine, the government can obtain it without a warrant. It's not a search if the government obtains that. You know, I wrote Wisner, and is it Wisner, Wisner? I don't know how to pronounce. You can tell me which one, the long I or the short I. But I wrote him, and I was trying to get an interview / discussion with Snowden, and never did. I wrote him about my theory of third-party doctrine, and he wasn't very receptive about it. The other one who wasn't receptive about it is Greenwald. But again, my theory of privacy, as you'll see as you get into the book, is based on property and contract. And I think the real solution to this third-party doctrine problem, and again, this doctrine is the doctrine that says once you share information with a third party, it is no longer protected by the Fourth Amendment. There's no longer a warrant requirement. The government can get that information without presenting probable cause or particularized suspicion. And this has been applicable to all this information since the 1970s, when the Supreme Court started applying this doctrine to phone records and bank records, normal stuff in the 1970s. They did not foresee the extent to which it would result in invasion of privacy for individuals the way it does today. Because again, as we go about our daily lives all the time, we are sharing information with third parties constantly, all over the place. And that information, according to this doctrine, can get, you know, snatched up by the government. So for example, going back to what I was talking about with shopping in the grocery store, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau will pick up that information under the guise of protecting you from unscrupulous creditors. Creditors are going to take advantage of you. Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, protecting consumers. It's such a noble cause, and it invades your privacy. And the government does this. Why? Because once they have a regulatory excuse, they just collect all that information. So they have this database about you over here, and then there's the gun purchasing database over here, and then there's all sorts of Obamacare generated health record databases over here, and you know, the databases about all these different aspects of your life. A little bit of you is over here, a little bit of you is over there and over there. And then any president, thanks to Obama helping this along, any president can whip out the pen and the phone and say, hey, Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, we want to combine your database with the gun purchasing database over here because we have some safety security pretense, that we have to combine these and figure out whether somebody's a risk or whatever it is. It's just wrong, right? The idea that the government doesn't need a warrant to collect all these little pieces of information from you, and then that it has the power to combine all these scattered pieces of information about you and put it into one database that could generate a complete picture of your whole personal life. And that's not even enough for them. They want to take that extra step and kill all the encryption that would give them all the personal information that's on your phone, on your devices and stuff as well. Your personal communications that you're protecting by encryption. They think they should be able to have access to that, potentially without a warrant, depending on what the Supreme Court does in Carpenter. So for me, part of getting this sense of this book being in my mind as clear and as, so almost writing itself, that sense that I had with my dissertation, because my dissertation, like I said, when I figured out what my logic of it was, it's like it almost wrote itself. I need to see that piece of the puzzle. I need to see what the court has done in Carpenter. I'm pretty sure that the court is not going to adopt my preferred solution. I know what my solution to the third party doctrine is. I know that it involves a respect for property and contract rights that no court today is ready to grant. I also have a proposed interim solution that should be palatable even to today's Supreme Court. And I'm skeptical as to whether they're even going to do that. But I would like to, as I said, see Carpenter, see how it measures up to, what I have in my mind as the preferred ideal solution. And also, in the context of today, what is the best you could hope for solution to this problem? Measure that up and see how it all is going to fit into the logic of my presentation. But as it stands right now, I've got the book divided into two things. So it's legalizing privacy, why and how. The why, under the why part of it, I, of course, present the problem, give you a picture of what is your typical day like as you go along sharing information with third parties, and then give you the bad news, which is that all of this information that you share with third parties is available to the government without a warrant, without probable cause, without particularized suspicion. And then I have to answer the question, so what? Because there's a lot of people who, well, I have nothing to hide, and security and, terrorism and, oh my gosh. So I have to tell people why they should care. And I talk about in this, the things, that government might do to you on the basis of having personal information about you. So we could talk about in that, for example, but I want to dig in and get some more examples. But, remember IRS targeting of certain, say, Tea Party groups for special scrutiny, things like that the government already has a track record of doing based on their knowledge of personal information about you. Not even that personal, but somewhat personal. The government just has too much power, and it's got some track record of using its knowledge about you to make decisions to do things to you that violate your rights, because it has the power to violate your rights. But it's not just that. I'm not gonna completely ignore the idea that big companies are also doing some things that are not necessarily in individuals' best interest, with their private information. Obviously, as somebody who believes in property and contract rights, and that everybody has a choice about whether, for instance, to go out here on YouTube like this or have an account on Facebook and everything else, I'm not going to say that the companies are bad and evil for trying to do this, but I'm going to let people think about this. So for example, I've said this before, Facebook, right, how much do I blame Facebook for the mistakes that it made leading to the Cambridge Analytica, you want to call it scandal or problems that they've had? I don't blame them so much, because in a way, Facebook is reacting to the sort of privacy legal culture, the tone that the government has sent. The government has set the tone since the 1970s that once you share information with a third party, that you no longer have a reasonable expectation of privacy in it. So Facebook felt like, hey, if they're sharing information with, for example, a scholar who's doing some scholarly research, if your data is going to them, that you shouldn't be so concerned, that it's for a good cause and everything else. So now Facebook, they're realizing, no, that they can't do that, that, they should ethically use your information only for the purposes that you actually agree to. What we should all be readily agreeing to is that Facebook wants to use our information to sell us stuff, but you aren't necessarily so eager to have Facebook use it for other purposes. Like I said, sharing it with scholars to do some research about how to manipulate you, which is basically what some of those scholars were doing. Then, so there's a so what in terms of what government might do, what companies might do, even if the companies I don't think are to blame the way that the government is. But then I've got the bigger question: why you should care more generally about privacy. Try to instill in people a renewed respect for the value of privacy. And some of you have heard me talk about this before, where I have explained what I believe, and also drawing upon the research of someone like Susan Cain in her book, Quiet. What's the value of privacy for productivity, personal relationships, the ability to enjoy your other values and things like that. So in that discussion, I'm actually maybe going to break it up into two chapters, one on the nature of privacy. What is privacy? Because there's been a huge debate in the literature about what even is privacy. Is privacy a claim, or is it a state? What exactly is it? So what is privacy? And then, what is the value of privacy to the rational person? What's the existing state of the law of privacy? How is your privacy protected generally? And then I go into what I think is actually wrong with the state of the law of privacy. Privacy is now this distinct right. It's not based on property and contract. So I'll explain what I think is wrong with that. So that's all in the why. Why do we need to legalize privacy? So it's, the problem looked through the lens of the third party doctrine. The so what, why should you care in terms of, what government and companies do to you if they have your information, why you should care generally about privacy, and why describing the current law of privacy and showing you that it's in a pretty sorry state, that it's not adequately protecting you. So then we go into the how. How are you going to recapture privacy in your life? How are you going to take advantage of privacy in your life? And so then I talk about anything that you might do outside of the law to avail yourself of privacy. And I'm going to include in there a discussion of encryption. One thing that I wouldn't have been able to do had I written this book 4 years ago, I guess I could do, updated edition or whatever. But now I realize the need to put in there a thorough defense of keeping encryption legal. And that's something that I didn't have in my outline several years ago. So I'll be talking about, that we need to have encryption remain legal, that, give my full argument as to why we should be able to have the digital online or in a device equivalent of a home to which only you have the key, so that if the government wants to get information, in certain realms, right? Realms where you're not sharing with a third party, where you can have things that are encrypted or in a phone that's locked with a password or whatever, that the government should have to come to you, right? Remember, government used to have to come to you with a warrant. They wouldn't say, oh, well, boy, that's just a big hassle, or, I don't know, anti-confrontational government. They don't want confrontation. And so they want to do the easy thing. They want the easy way out. They want to go to AT&T, or they want to go to YouTube, or they want to go to Facebook. They want to get the information that they want about you without having to confront you personally. And that's lame. It used to be if they wanted to get the most personal things about you, they'd have to come to your home and they'd have to present you with a warrant. And then let them in to search if they have a valid warrant, etc. That's how it should be. And yeah, sometimes you've got the terrorist scumbag who dies with the stuff on his phone and nobody can ever get it or whatever. That's going to happen. Sometimes there's going to be some information maybe that dies with the person, but so be it, right? So be it. That is something that we should still have a right to. So I have to have a defense of that, and talk about how I would reform the law in addition to that, because I would say a solution like encryption is necessary, that we should have it be legal, but it's not sufficient. A lot of people are very happy to say, okay, well, forget the law. But I think we need both. And I think even if I get all the reforms, if I got all of my dream reforms in the law of privacy, I would still want, and I still think it'd be proper for us to have encryption legal, just the same as I would think that it would be important for us to still have the right to bear arms, even if we had an incredibly efficient police service and we had a government with a perfectly worded constitution and all upstanding politicians and everything else. No. We should be able to have, that extra bit of personal security. So, so solution will be encryption and the reformation in the law. Again, my solution to the third-party doctrine involves looking at the common law of property and contract and implementing that to solve the problem that the third-party doctrine was designed to solve. And even if that solution cannot happen anytime soon, maybe 100 years down the road or something, after objectivism wins or, whatever, even if that can't happen yet, nonetheless, I think that a good court could be informed by the common law in drawing the contours of the third-party doctrine. So that's essentially the logic of my book as it stands now. As I said, the missing piece is Carpenter, what happens in Carpenter. So what I'm going to do is I'm getting started on this. I'm going to be going back. I've got a draft of chapter 1 I'm looking at today. And while I drop off my car for repairs, I'm going to bring my draft of the chapter and work on that this afternoon. And, just dive in and do whatever I can, realizing that I'm going to be leaving places for discussion of Carpenter. And of course, as I go through, I'm going to be aware of where I might want to bring in and compare Carpenter. And I've watched Leonard Peikoff write books, and I've seen him as he goes through things also, decide that, again, like I said, when I just going through this outline yesterday, I realized that I need to include a much broader discussion of this whole issue of encryption than I had before. That I want to put a whole defense of it, and that, and I realized that even if I got the reforms in the law that I wanted, that I would still think it'd be important to keep encryption legal. And for those of us who want to take advantage of it. So anyway, that is it. Now, I've got some questions here already in the chat. Is privacy, in your view, its own set of rights, claims, or does it derive from judicious use of one's property and contract? Yeah, it's no secret that, my theory is it's not exactly what they call in the literature a reductionist theory, but it's consistent with that. And the reductionists, again, are people who say that if you are using your property and your contract rights you will create a state of privacy. And actually, those are the states of privacy that you deserve to not have invaded, without a good cause or some some proper reason, proper warrant, and things like that. So no, it does, in my view, derive from use of property and contract. It's not fundamental. And in the book, I'll have the full defense of that. So, oh yay, Jay just joined us. Jay, you'll have to go back and watch it because I'm actually nearly done. Stuart seems already sold on the value of privacy about alone time and everything else. Okay, Wisner's pronounced it with a short I, so I'm going to try to be conscious of that. Excellent. Yeah, no, so yeah, I believe privacy properly is based on property and contract. Let me just give you a couple examples just to illustrate that. So suppose you're an employer and you believe that it's important that your employees not be under the influence of certain type of drugs when they're on the job because it's unsafe for them to perform their duties when when they're under the influence of drugs. They could get somebody hurt or killed or who knows. There have been cases brought that when employers have put forth the policy for drug testing, they say, oh no, you can't test your employees because it invades your employees' right to privacy if you drug test them. Now, what do you have there? You have an alleged, sort of battle, conflict between two rights, supposedly. A right to privacy versus the employer rights to property. And if you actually just think about it for a few seconds, right, it's not, again, a few seconds for me, right, because I'm coming from my objectivist perspective. But from my perspective, Ayn Rand's philosophy, you don't have a right to a job. And an employer has a right to conduct his business the way that he sees fit and to offer employees jobs on terms to which they both voluntarily agree. The employer is a person too with rights and everything else. And so, the job is a conditional thing. And if the employer says, hey, in order to have this job, you have to, I don't know, just this is just an obnoxious example, but I'll tell you something the employer has a right to do, but not. Okay, what about this? It'll be less obnoxious. In order to have a job here, you have to come in and tell me what you had for breakfast every morning, including the weights. You have to weigh the food and tell us what you ate or something for breakfast every morning. That's ridiculous. It's like particularly invasive and stuff. There's been more recent cases where they've been talking about, this is a real case, putting a chip of some kind, some type of little chip underneath the skin of an employee that allows them to maybe unlock a device that's crucial to the performance of their job by just putting their finger on it or something. Some people might say, oh, well, that invades their privacy and everything else. No, an employer has the right to put these conditions forth for the obtaining of a job. And then you have the right to say, no, sorry, that's ridiculous. And let's let the market decide whether or not it's good for employers to put little chips under an employee's finger. I don't think I'd want to do it. It'd have to be a really amazing job. And I'd have to really see why that was necessary because it's very invasive. But some people are doing it. Okay, fine. That's within the scope of rights. But similarly, if it was the weird quiz about your breakfast and weighing all the quantities and what brand, of coffee do you drink or whatever it is, yeah, the employer could do it. You could say, no, thanks. I don't want that job. So that's one example. Another example, there was a car rental company that had, and I'm sure a lot of car rental companies have similar riders in their contracts. So when you rent a car from the company, there's a little provision in the fine print that says you may not drive this car over a certain speed, and maybe also you may not drive this car outside a certain radius of, this city or something. Suppose those are the conditions that are in this. And the car rental company will attach to the car now a GPS device that can track what speed you were driving at and where you were and stuff. And suppose, you don't know, like you don't read those things. You just sign and you take your car and you drive off, and you drive the car too fast, and or you go out of the radius, and you come back to the car rental company, you turn the car in, and they say, hey, our little device showed that you did this and you did that. Suppose you come back to the car rental company and you say, oh, you invaded my privacy by tracking what speed I was driving or where I was, or, while I was driving your car. There's been a lawsuit actually alleging that exact thing. So, is there actually an invasion of privacy? Do you have a conflict of rights here? Does someone have a right to privacy, and then you have your right to property rental company, and then they conflict? And what trumps the other one? Which one's more important? The privacy advocates would like to say, okay, well, let's let the judge weigh it out. Who has the reasonable expectation of privacy? Is this an expectation of privacy that society is prepared to recognize as reasonable? This is the sort of language that courts use when they engage in this sort of balancing test, one versus the other. But I would say, look, if you have these situations where two so-called rights appear to conflict, that you need to, in Rand's terms, check your premises. And in fact, I would say that a rental car company, has the perfect right to determine the conditions under which they are agreeing to rent the car out. And that condition could include that they're going to track where you are when you're driving it and what speed you're going or whatever. And you can decide, hey, I'm not going to rent from Avis because Avis doesn't only track what speed I was going, it tracks exactly where I was driving. And, I don't really like that. For some reason you'd say, well, I don't mind if my cell phone tracks where I am all the time, but I don't want Avis knowing where I'm driving all the time, or the particular trip is personal and sensitive to you. So just about that trip, you don't want that, and in fact, you were not even going to bring your cell phone wherever the secret place was you were driving. Who knows? Get people aware of this. Let the market decide these things. Again, as I said, a property owner should have the right to determine the conditions under which he's going to let somebody else use the property, as long as it's not any kind of fraud. They're not doing any weird enslavement or, undue influence and things like this, like coercing people into a contract to which they don't really agree, stuff like that. Is my viewpoint that reductionism and coherentism is a dichotomy you seek to transcend? You'll have to define coherentism to me, because in the literature of privacy, I'm not familiar with the term coherentism. Perhaps that's one that's come up since I've written my dissertation and I need to take a peek at it. But reductionist literature, I took a whole article to analyze the main threads of reductionist literature and dismissed all the various types of reductionism as not quite adequate as a critique of this. Jay over there is talking about the pre-order. As I said, pre-order of my book, I'm not even going to put it up there as an option until I'm confident that I can deliver the book on a certain date. And so now what I have to figure out is how many words can I write per day? 5,000 words is approximately, I believe, 25 pages. And, how long is it going to take me to write a chunk of that each day? We have to figure it all out. So I will. What else? What else do we have? Let me scroll up a little bit as far as I can on the questions. Oh, wild hair is better. Okay, great. Yeah, no deal. Just remove the regime on Iran, says Ken. I don't know if removing the regime is something that we should do, or is it something that would, if they do end up, I saw something about they were planning on starting to lob some bombs or something over at Israel. If they attack Israel and then Israel decides maybe we work with them, we help them, but I don't know that Israel needs help. I mean, Yaron talks about the fact that he doesn't think Israel needs help in this, that they can do it. Stuart, when you're a philosopher, you don't carve out a niche, you carve out a Nietzsche. Yeah. Oh God, me as a feminist on Tucker. I don't know what he'll make of this, if he'd let me come on and talk about this theory of privacy, that would be really great. That's one thing that I'm hoping in building up the goodwill with Tucker going on there, and being a good sport about being called a feminist, right? That, or, trying to carve out what sort of feminism I find palatable to myself. Let's see. Yeah, we can give the Iranian revolutionaries moral backing, says Unshelled Coast over here. Yeah, I agree with that as well. So I'm hoping that kind of helps give you a sense of where I am and what I'm doing. So what I'm envisioning again is coming and talking to you sort of informally once a week. If there is something that I want to talk about, so for example, anything that I've seen from Jordan Peterson, or I'm thinking of digging into Steven Pinker's book, Enlightenment Now, because in looking at some of the introductory material there, I'm seeing that it might also give me more of the sense of history, the scope of history, and not being so concerned, not putting so much emphasis on the day-to-day developments in the news. North Korea, what do we make of North Korea? Well, he got 3 Americans freed, and should we say that that's a huge victory? I mean, even New York Times seems to be conceding that this is somewhat of a diplomatic victory for Trump. Does it mean anything in terms of the nuclear program and the overall danger to everybody else due to their nuclear program? For me, I can't even predict that, right? And then there's another argument for me to tell you. Maybe I should focus and stick to some things that I know a lot better for a bit. Of course, I think Yaron's got a better sense of foreign policy questions than I do. So that's good division of labor as well. So look forward to seeing me with Yaron. I'm going to always try to bring any challenging question that I can to him and play devil's advocate as much as I can with him, and have fun talking to him and trying to come up with what are the most important stories of the week. And is there anything that you can, say about it in the moment, that we don't necessarily have to wait for history to play out? As I said, we can morally evaluate somebody who decides that they can make a deal with a totalitarian, murderous totalitarian theocratic regime. You can't, right? So, we can say these things, but what can you say given the context that there was this deal and then they're eliminating the deal and that we don't know what Trump is going to do next? Can we actually predict that this is going to be good in the long term and tout it as this great victory as so many Trump supporters has out on Twitter? I'm not so sure. It might end up being better. That deal never should have been made. But what's going to happen in its place? So, as I said, less of an emphasis on the day-to-day, more on the themes. The last thing I just encourage you guys, I told you I'm still a little bit jet lagged, and it's not so much jet lagged as I might even say it, to use Jordan Peterson's words, carb poisoned. It's not like I ate a ton. I was telling you I ate a ton of carbs. Well, ton for me. I took this flight back, and I had this great vacation. It's the kind of vacation that you don't want to have end. You could have it go on. And so, I'm on the plane and they're serving me this stupid airline food that is heavily carb and sugar laden in some of it. And I didn't even eat all the carbs that they put in front of me, but I ate most of the carbs that they put in front of me, which is uncharacteristic of me. So I ate something close to the standard American diet just for this 10-hour stretch on the way back. And it just hit me badly. It just hit me really badly. Stuffy nose and just, it was yuck. So my recommendation is to just kind of rethink carbs. I don't necessarily advocate. Jordan Peterson talks about just glowingly the diet that he's been doing thanks to his daughter, which is he was doing only meats and greens And then apparently he's gone on only meat. He's one of these that's done the only carnivore diet. And I've read about people on Facebook, 17 months, they eat only meat and that's it. And they're doing great. And no, their kidneys don't have problems. And you don't need supplements because everything's in the meat and there's toxins in plants and it did all this stuff, right? And they eat absolutely no carbs, but a lot of the things that is this is about is losing weight and stuff too, so it can really kind of suck you in. I would say, unless you're somebody who really wants to lose a lot of weight and really has trouble sticking to a varied diet that is healthful, I wouldn't try one of those extreme things, where it's like only meats and greens, or of course, if you have a serious health issue, like you have serious autoimmune problems like Peterson's daughter, it would be completely appropriate to try a really restrictive diet and then do very careful adding back in things to try to figure out how it helps you. But for most of us, it's just, eat something reasonable and keep your eyes open and listen to your body about these things. And so it brought to me back, just looking at diet again and a renewed sense of, no, you can't just eat anything with impunity. You can't eat the normal carbs that this normal American does and expect to feel okay, especially when you've been treating your body better for a long time. So that was the other tidbit that I have. You can, if you want, if you're somebody who has been ill with any kind of autoimmune disorder, you can follow Jordan Peterson and his daughter. I think Michaela is her name. She's got a whole website where she talks about it, but there's a Facebook group. It's called Zeroing In on Health. And a lot of those people are talking about just eating entirely meat. If you want to research it, go for it. But when I looked at it, and I found it tempting because Peterson was talking about, like, he was snoring and it was gone. He had gum disease and it was gone, like these different things. But he was eating bread. I mean, he was eating the standard American diet. So I don't think it's necessary to go to that extreme in order to be a healthy person. But as bad as I felt in the first day or so after I got back, I was thinking, maybe I want to try this. But no. So I'm going to still be doing buttered coffee, and I'm probably going to keep my food groups of dark chocolate and guacamole and bacon. And yeah. So anyway, I'll see you guys Saturday. Thank you. Oh, what are we talking about? Jay's talking about the diet. Let me get that there. Oh, and Rationality 101 says, yes, Enlightenment Now. Definitely recommends that Pinker book. Jay says, the only carbs I eat are from vegetables. Started 2 weeks ago, lost 12 pounds already. Yeah, that's great. But for me, I don't want to lose any weight. Not even a pound I don't want to lose. So it would be bad for me to cut out the level of carbs that I had been eating, because carbs help you maintain weight. And what I just need to be is more sensible about the carbs. Like I said, I ate the sugar that they put in front of me on that plane, and that was no. It just gives you a sense that at least certain carbs anyway are poison. As I say that, my stomach is growling. I have to go eat something. Bye-bye, you guys. Okay. I'm going to see you on Saturday. And yeah, I'll be back with the headphones and not the wild hair. Take care.